Hello viewers, welcome back. Today we are going to discuss about a very important lesson on characteristics of old age. Now this is a particular topic, and this is considered to be this period is considered to be the last lifespan in the individual's life. So very importantly, we are today here to discuss about the various characteristics in late adulthood or old age. Now the last stage is the lifespan, and it is frequently subdivided into two parts. Now the first part is called as the early old age, now which consists of age from 60 years onwards and till 70 years. So people who come under 60 to 70 years can be called as elderly, and the advanced age group, people with age group of 70 and till the end of their life are considered to be old people. Now people during 60s, as I have told you, are referred to elderly, and people who are above 70 are referred to as old age. Now these are the people who have almost lost their vigor of youth, and hence they are considered to be old. Like childhood and young adulthood and middle age, it is quite obvious that late adulthood, that is old age, is also characterized by certain physical and psychological changes, and very importantly the results or the impact of these changes determine the later adjustments in their later lives. Now sometimes what happens, the characteristics of late adulthood are far more likely to lead certain poor adjustments, because as it is a degenerating phase of life, there is definitely a poor adjustment. We cannot expect the elderly to have a good adjustment or a happy adjustment life at that particular period of time. Now we talk about specific characteristics during old age, and these are very important to be considered, because the first characteristics, as we discuss now, is that the old age is a period of decline. Definitely yes, because as I have mentioned earlier, and it is quite evident that old age is a period of decline, a decline in terms of bodily changes, also the physical and mental changes also takes place simultaneously. And we always understand that people are never static, we keep changing in terms of our physical changes as well as mental changes. Therefore the initial beginning of our life can be considered as evolutional period, which involves the maturity of structure and functioning. But when you talk about the old age, it is a period of involutional, because it mainly involves in a regression or sometimes degeneration of the earlier stages. Now this is something to be discussed in terms of the aging process, because when we talk about aging process, it affects both physical and mental structures and functions. Sometimes the period during late adulthood or during the old age, when physical and mental decline is slow, sometimes during 50 years or during the early 50s, there is a slow and gradual decline of the physical and mental functioning in the individual, and sometimes this can be compensated in terms of medication or in terms of taking care of health. All these factors can delay in the decline, and this is known as senescence. This is a technical term, and this is a time of growing old or aging. It is a sign that indicates that the individual is in the process of aging. Now people may become senescent in their 50s, early 50s, or sometimes not until they reach 60 or 70 years. It all depends on the individual's rate of physical functioning. The first characteristics that we are discussing, that old age is a period of decline, and decline comes partly from physical and also from mental or psychological factors. The physical cause of decline is a change in the bodily cells and not due to a specific disease, and therefore the aging process begins. After talking about the physical declines, we can also talk about the psychological declines. What are the various factors or the psychological factors that can contribute to the decline in the individual, especially unfavorable attitude towards oneself, maybe in terms of stagnation in their life, or maybe the individual is having poor self concept. All these psychological factors can influence the individual's aging process. And not only the individual self concept, but also the individual's life experiences, his career and work, and his relations with other individuals can also lead to senility. It is very important to consider the role of motivation in the individual's life during old age. People who are motivated, we can observe in terms of their commitment, in terms of their activities, which can enhance their motivation towards a positive living in the later lives. But people who have low motivation or people having less self-esteem can contribute to early aging process, rather than individuals who are highly motivated can have a delayed aging process. So, the individual's motivation can also enhance in delaying the aging process. Now, we come to the next important characteristics of old age is that individual differences. It is very important that today, even more than in the past, it is recognized that aging affects different people in a different way. So, it is always accepted that we are all unique, we differ from each other. Therefore, even in the aging process, the individual differences are highly important to consider. Therefore, it is impossible to classify anyone as typically an old person, or there isn't any typical trait to consider a person as an old person. Therefore, people age differently because they have different heredity factors that influence them, and not only the heredity or the genetic endowments, but the socio-economic background of the individual. People from high income group and people from low income group, and also the cultural background that they come, all these factors and the different lifestyles of the individual has an impact in their aging process. Therefore, all these factors, individual factors, count in the late adulthood period. And very importantly, when we are talking about individual differences, it is very important to consider the gender differences. Especially the gender differences are quite apparent or obvious among the members of the same gender, and but they are even more apparent when men and women are compared, because aging takes place at different rates for both men and women. Physical aging precedes mental aging, and though sometimes the reverse is true, especially when the individual is concerned about growing old and lets grow mentally when the first signs of physical aging appear. Now, after these two characteristics of old age, we are coming to the third important characteristic, is that old age is a judging criteria. Now, how do we judge an old person, or who judges an old person? Now, to our understanding or to a child's understanding, now there are certain criteria in judging old people. Especially for children and young people, they judge elderly or old people depending on the appearance and also the activities. These are the two important criteria to judge old people. One is the appearance, the physical appearance, and the second one is the activities. So, if you ask any child who can understand or who is able to express how do old people look like, now their first understanding will be on their physical appearance. They say they have a white hair, they have wrinkles on their face. So based on the physical observations, they talk about the old people, and they have a notion that the old people are no longer able to work anymore. They remain in a particular place for a long period of time, and all these two important factors are explained in their own way. Even in young adults, there is a understanding that old people cannot work efficiently, and all these factors like graying hair and various telltale signs of aging are quite evident in old age. And it is very important that these two most common criteria are used to judge old people. It is also evident that not every elderly person is able to accept this. So they try to camouflage these telltale signs of aging process through various mechanisms in terms of putting a dye for the hair, and also adopting to the trendy lifestyles and clothings, so that they are looking more younger when compared to their present physical telltale signs. The fourth important characteristics of old age is the social attitudes towards them. Very important social attitudes where the society evaluates the elderly person, who they are, what they are. Now quite evidently there is an unfavorable social attitude towards elderly, especially when it is universally acceptable that there are unfavorable attitudes towards old people, but they tend to be stronger among certain racial groups and social classes than among other groups, and people come from countries where respect for the elderly is customary, usually treat elderly in a more respectful and more considerate manner. And even in joint families system in India, where people respect their elders, and older people, especially in India, are considered to be the senior citizens. They have a special place for them, and they are also considered as a privileged group. They receive concessions in almost all areas. For example, they have concessions in the train fares or travel related. They have a special seating arrangements in different public properties, and they have income tax concessions. And members of the upper classes especially are considered as the topmost priority in the family, because they hold certain financial strings which gives fortune to the families. Therefore, it is very important, and treating the elderly in a respectful way in some cultures is of utmost importance. Another important characteristics that I would like to put forth is that old age is considered to be a minority group status. Let us see how. It is a fact that the number of old people are growing. In this context, I would like to quote that by 2015, in a country like India, the most populated individuals in India would be the elderly people, according to the research. And therefore, it is a fact that the number of old people are growing, and they occupy a minority status. And what do we understand by minority status is that they are excluded from an interaction and with other groups in the population, which gives them little or no power. This minority group status is primarily the result of unfavorable social attitudes towards the aged, and that have been fostered by the unfavorable stereotypes, where we label them as insecure or inferior. This second class citizenship puts the elderly on the defensive and has a marked effect on their personal and social adjustments. Now, sometimes the elderly are very insecure, especially the women, where most of the violence are against these elderly women, and sometimes the elderly have to be dependent on the younger children in order to go out, or they are in terms of dependency stage when we talk about the minority group status. So, I think we have to work on various status that needs to be enhanced in these particular minority groups, because the population among the aged are going to be on high. Now, old age is considered as a minority group status, and wherein the old people have a very less role to play in the society, or a role which has no power in it. Sometimes even these people are segregated in old age homes, they are put in old age homes, they are institutionalized, and care is being provided by certain caregivers who are running an institute, and not by the family members. So, this indicates that definitely this minority group status is of great concern among the elderly. We are going to talk about another important characteristic, that is role change. Now, there are different roles that has been played from the beginning of the individual's life till the end. Now, what particular role that the elderly needs to play is of utmost concern. Will they be able to play certain desired and expected roles? Yes or no? This is an important question to be answered. Now, just as middle-aged person or people must learn to play new roles, so must the elderly. Now, there is a need to adapt to the changing roles depending on their physical strength. Today, where efficiency, strength, speed and physical attractiveness are highly valued, here elderly are often regarded as useless or worthless, because all these are not nowadays you will not be able to find in elderly people. Therefore, they cannot compete with the young population in the areas where highly valued traits are needed. Therefore, the social attitude towards them would be definitely unfavorable. Furthermore, it is expected that old people will play a decreasingly less active role in social and community affairs because of their declining physical strength. During this particular period, as that is old age period, there are a lot of roles that needs to be changed, as we discussed earlier. In addition to this, it is very important that the old people are now no more able to continue the previous activities that they used to do, maybe in terms of basic physical activity like walking, or going to a particular club, interacting with the same senior citizen groups. All these may not be able to perform by the elderly person, and they may remain on bed or they may remain at home in order to maintain their normal health. Therefore, these poor role change can also influence their aging process. Old age is also characterized in terms of poor adjustment. Let us see how. Because of the unfavorable social attitudes towards the elderly, there is a tendency to develop a lowered self-esteem or a lowered self-concept among the elderly. This results in poor adjustment in their personal life and social life as well. And this has also to do with their experience of depression and other psychological problems. Due to increase in the financial losses, also the physical loss, all these problems can also enhance their poor adjustment skills. As we were talking about poor adjustment at a personal level and also the social level, now at the personal level, the individual tries to have a self-talk and certain statements like I am helpless, I am worthless, I have nothing to do in this society, people do not recognize my skills or people do not recognize my age. All these factors can contribute to the individual's poor adjustment skills at personal level as well as social level. At a personal level, it is also important that the individual is unable to adjust not only with his self, but also with the health conditions that he is having. Maybe a diabetic, maybe a hypertensive, or maybe an arthritic patient. All these problems can also contribute towards his health, hence further enhancing his poor adjustment. Another important criteria for poor adjustment is the family, which is very important. Most of the time what happens is, at different families have a different role to play with the elderly. Some families consider the elderly as an important person in the family. Major decisions need to be taken by the elderly, but sometimes the younger generation may not be able to recognize the importance of elderly person having lot of experience in the family and work related. Therefore, it has an impact in the poor adjustment within the family itself. We are going to talk about the last important characteristics in old age, that is, there is a extensive desire for rejuvenation. Now, the minority group status, according to most elderly persons, has naturally given rise to a desire to remain young as long as possible. Every individual, if you would like to ask them, if they have a wish, they would definitely say that they want to remain young forever. So, as the histories talk about, where in those days people wanted to remain young forever, so that they were trying to take certain medicines, they were trying to take certain witchcraft and all those which could help them to remain ever young. So, now the medicines have also taken the shape of providing certain or even changing the sex hormones of the individuals, wherein sex therapy such as Gerovital, this is a youth drug and it is now used popularly all over the world. Apart from Gerovital related factors and other sex therapies, it is also important that in order to rejuvenate or in order to have an extensive desire for rejuvenation, it is important that nutrition is another important criteria during old age, and they have to follow a particular diet which is easily digestible for them, and following a nutritional diet and also fitness, a remarkable effort to make certain physical adjustments is also an important criteria in order to have a desire for rejuvenation. And if possible, there is a need for intimate relationship during old age is also another important factor for a desire to remain younger. And in addition to this, being with younger generations, interacting and exchanging ideas can also help them to retain or have a feeling of youthfulness. And also certain trendy outfits can also contribute them to remain younger for some time. Now, let us summarize. So far we have been discussing about the various characteristics during old age, and old age, it begins from 60 years onwards, and sometimes if there is an early aging process, it can be considered as a senescence, where the physical and mental decline is slow and gradual during 50s itself. And old age begins approximately at 60 according to the Harlock criterions of lifespan development, and it is the closing period of an individual's life, and it is characterized by many physical as well as psychological changes, and that are far more likely to lead poor adjustments, both personal and at social level. And sometimes it is not towards the happiness that we expect, but it is more of the unhappiness that we expect in the old age. And if you remember Erikson, the great person, he talks about old age, where the individual tries to integrate his entire life and then tries to evaluate himself during old age. And if there is the crisis condition or the psychological conflict that they experience is the despair or the unhappiness or the dissatisfaction that they have. Most importantly, that we have to understand is aging process differs from individual to individual. We cannot generalize that at particular period of age people have a aging process. Sometimes there is a delayed aging process depending on the individual's personality factors, heredity factors, and the individual's positive attitude towards life. All these factors can also delay their aging process, whereas people with less motivation, people who have negative self concept, can have an early aging process. And it is also understood that aging has a very unfavorable attitude from the youth. They consider old people as weak and they are more troublesome, and caregiving is a very tough role to play. Therefore, there are many stereotypes towards old age, and the old person is considered to be a subject to joke and humor. Psychological makeup plays a very important role in the aging process. It is very sure that every individual have to go through this process, but it can be delayed, and this requires a psychological makeup in terms of strong positive attitude towards age, and a very important consideration is the integrity of the individual's lifespan. So far the individual's success matters, at the same time the individual's physical health, which is of utmost priority, whether they are going to take care of their health or not, has an important role to play, and this includes the psychological makeup of the individual. And most important is the social support of the individual, how far the elderly is being getting proper care from the family members, the society as well. So the psychological makeup contributes the health of the individual, the social support of the individual, and more importantly the individual's positive attitude towards life is of utmost importance.